We start the show with a Fox 5 News alert. President Trump says he could decide in the next 2 weeks whether the U.S. will strike Iran. This as missile strikes between Israel and Iran now entering week 2. Since tensions began last week, more than 600 people have been killed in Iran, and dozens have also been killed in Israel. Earlier this week, Iran's supreme leader rejected U.S. calls to surrender. Iran's foreign minister plans to meet with European counterparts in Geneva today. Joining us to discuss this and so much more, Mr. Timothy Allen Simon, political strategist back here on the Live Zone. Happy Friday, my friend.
Happy Friday to you, Guy.
All right, let's jump into it. In this case, we're going to start off with the big story of the day, and that is the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Iran. You just heard me make mention, President Trump saying he will allow some 2 weeks for diplomacy before deciding whether to launch a strike. Now, some say that's the right approach, whereas others say that's far too long. What say you?
Well, I do not think it's far too long because there are talks going on with France, Britain, and Iran, which I believe the Trump administration is observing. I believe his preference would be for diplomatic efforts to take place to allow Iran. There's a term that was used by President Richard Nixon during the Vietnam War, and that is retreat with dignity, to allow Iran to maintain its sovereign image amongst its constituencies while it continues to work out a nuclear deal. In Iran's case, they do not want to be disallowed the ability to enrich uranium. In the case of the United States, they want a consortium that would supply Iran with its uranium for nuclear, civil and medical nuclear purposes. So I think diplomacy is still the preferred action. However, as we've heard, these very powerful bombs, these blockbuster bombs, are still in the United States possession, and could be used if Trump becomes so frustrated. But let me say one other thing. There's been little to no discussion about the War Powers Act. And actually, the president is supposed to go to Congress before taking action against another sovereign. We'll see if President Trump uses that lever as well in order to deflect some of the focus on himself.
Yeah, very interesting point, Timothy, but yet again, something that we'll have to wait and see if that actually unfolds. I want to bring it back here to the United States. In this case, a troubling story. An Ohio Republican lawmaker claims he was run off the road while someone made death threats. An arrest has been made as we know it. The question I pose to you is, should lawmakers have an increased security presence now?
No doubt. The political vitriol has risen to levels that I have not seen, and I'm actually old enough to remember the assassinations of JFK and Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. They weren't necessarily elected officials, but where the tension and conflict domestically is rising to levels that have not been seen in recent memory. Yes, I have a niece in Congress, by the way, Latifah Simon, and I'm hoping that she and others, state representatives as well, utilize their sergeant of arms or whatever type of law enforcement they have at their disposal, understanding that they will be increasingly becoming targets of those who seek violence over working together as a nation.
Yeah, this is really troubling, Timothy. Yet again, I don't think any of us condone violence, no matter what side of the fence that you happen to, sit on. Speaking of Ohio, according to one report, we now know that Republicans might redraw House maps in Ohio and Texas to try to protect a narrow majority. This as they face the possibility of losing control of the House come next year. You think that will happen?
Oh, absolutely. Gerrymandering is as American as apple pie and football. Both parties do it to protect seats. And that is what contributes to our political vitriol, because there are too many members in the legislature, both state and federal, that are in what is called protected districts. That's why states like mine have attempted to have blue ribbon panels, that being California, to look at redistricting and its impact, particularly on communities that have been resource constrained. But make no bones about it, both sides of the aisle will draw districts that are designed to keep their representatives of either party in power. I would say the voter suppression side of that now is probably more on the right or the Republican side. But if you look at history, Democrats, particularly in the South, have had a very prolific track record of voter suppression as well. And I'm speaking of the civil rights, voter rights era of this country.
Well, most recently, Timothy, I can speak to this. I was in the state of Texas when they redrew the lines in Houston, and that's when, well, Congressman, and Democratic Congressman at that, Al Green, yet again took his first seat as a first-time congressman,
Yes.
to your point. Let's move on with regard to the state of California. We now know that the Supreme Court will allow fuel companies to sue over California's tough emission standards. Now, it's not clear how much practical impact the court's decision will have, being that President Trump seems to almost certain to withdraw the waiver just as he did during his first administration. Your thoughts on this, Timothy?
It's the California tailpipe emissions, which are regulated through our California Air Resources Board here in California, has been a political lightning rod throughout the country, particularly with the oil companies, as well as those who are part of the combustible part of our transportation, since we have seen an increase in electric vehicles. California has historically, under at least Democratic administrations, received a waiver, and other states have followed California's tailpipe emission standards. Now, it's not necessarily, it may be environmentally the right thing to do, but there are issues involving the interstate commerce clause and other legal protections that entities that do business nationally are typically protected. So this will be an interesting position. I'm sure it'll be litigated throughout the Trump administration's term.
Yeah, speaking of interesting, dear God, I got to tell you, this is really interesting, and that is a number of Democrats now accusing the Trump administration of weaponizing law enforcement to silence political foes. Acceptable or unacceptable if this is actually happening, Timothy?
Well, unacceptable if it is happening, and I think the evidence indicates whether it was the apprehension of the congresswoman who was entering an ICE facility and/or Senator Alex Batia here in California, the controller for the city of New York. We are seeing what looks to be intimidation amongst dissent or the opposition party. And the issue becomes, does this have a chilling effect on the right to free speech and assembly under the First Amendment? This is something that's very delicate in our country, and I would expect to hear more of the libertarian side of the Republican Party that wants smaller government, that's concerned about powers of the executive branch to vocalize their concerns. This has not happened, so hence it has been the Democratic Party primarily that is concerned that utilizing the United States Marines, federalizing the National Guard, which is happening in my state here in California, could go the other way if another office or another party was in the administration. So this should be something that all Americans should agree. We do not want to, as Secretary Tulsi Gabbard has said, liberate cities because they're under democratic socialist rule. That is not constitutional. It's not the American way.
As you put it, there's always a flip side to that coin, and we'll see if they would feel the same way had it been for them as well. We'll end with this, Timothy, and that is, according to a new poll, frustrated Americans want more checks on President Trump, but wait, there's more. They have dim views of the Democratic opposition. This is what I call a mess, Timothy.
It is a hot mess, and what has actually is transpiring before us is that the Democratic Party, which is the minority party in terms of the legislative equal branch of government, is acting like a minority party and not an opposition party. And it's different. Now, under a parliamentary system, you have opposition parties who will build coalitions against a prime minister or the executive branch. In the case of our constitutional republic structure, it puts the minority party at a disadvantage unless they can coalition with moderate or to liberal Republicans and independents. And in this regard, the Democrats have not been successful. They have not been able to get the votes from the other side of the aisle because Michael Johnson holds his caucus together. Now, the big, beautiful bill is going to be one of the tests of his abilities to hold his caucus together. But so far, he has been, in terms of a partisan speaker, because the speaker serves all of Congress.
Sure.
But he is clearly a partisan speaker. But to that extent, he has been holding his caucus together of only a 4-vote advantage, by the way.
Yet again, very interesting. Mr. Timothy Allen Simon, political strategist, joining us right here on the Live Zone. Make it a great weekend, my friend.
You as well, Guy, and as always, thank you.
But of course.